Yeah. Okay, so thank you to all of the presenters. Really, really fascinating projects. There'll be opportunities to speak with everyone a little bit more in Mozilla Hubs. Luckily, we've had a little bit more luck with it than Matthew seemed to have had, and we were kind of happy with Hubs. I hope you'll enjoy it this afternoon. I'm going to turn it over to John Bell now, who's going to moderate the next session. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. So I'm John Bell. I am the director of the Dev Studio here at Dartmouth. Before we launch into the next session, there is one technical thing that we need to take care of. Evelyn, if you could check the chat, it looks like you have somehow become the host of the meeting, and we need you to give that back to James Goodrich. So he is sending you some text chats to tell you how to do that. But for now, we will continue forward. So the first presenter in this second block is Bill Egan from Penn State.
Yes, thank you for having me. Are you able to see my screen? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is a very quick, brief, practical kind of use case of how we've had to adapt given these COVID times and how our initiative has been impacted. A little bit of context, I'm an instructional designer with Penn State World Campus. So largely our courses are online, asynchronous. We've got students all over the world. So to keep in line with best practices with accessibility and inclusive design, kind of connecting back to a few things talked about in the previous sessions about, you know, being dizzy and things like that, and there's all those considerations that come with virtual reality. Our immersive experiences are primarily browser based in the 360 video sort of realm, with the option to have a headset, and that's just to kind of, like I said, for things like accessibility and inclusive design across the board. Our goal for our initiatives are to get to true VR. We're not quite there yet, trying to push the envelope, but I think with this use case, we've gotten shoved in that direction even a little bit more. So I'm the lead designer on the RN to BSN undergraduate nursing program, and our use case is around a introduction to critical care course, where we introduce students to the ICU environment. Again, it's undergrad, so it's fairly basic fundamental, but we wanted to give students who might not have nursing experience in the ICU environment, put them into that environment. So of course, on March 18th, we were scheduled to go to our hospital and shoot the environment with our 360 video, maybe do some cool perspective shots of maybe putting the camera in the bed so you see it from the patient perspective, and kind of do some things creative in alignment with what we've done previously with 360 video. That, of course, did not happen on March 18th. The world got turned upside down, and we've been since haven't been able to really engage in those in-person video shoots. So instead of just throwing it by the wayside, we were trying to be solution-minded and figure out what we can do to still move forward and still achieve a portion of this. So this led us to looking into utilizing existing 3D assets that are out there. We do not have Unity developers on our team. We've got great multimedia specialists. So we utilized things like Sketchfab, and we're looking at TurboSquid, these kind of marketplaces, to see if we can kind of purchase prepackaged assets and then kind of work upon that and still create these immersive experiences. So you can see in our course here, it's this is all basically WebVR A-frame, but they can experience the you know, environment. They can move around and zoom in and zoom out. Basically what this is kind of getting used to the sounds and all the bells and whistles and things that you hear in that environment. So there's some ambient sound, and then you can activate the different elements. To explore that environment. I'll mute that because it'll probably get kind of loud. So this is exactly what they need to do within the environment. As far as it working, we provide instructions for usability and for an alternative experience, which is flat text-based, where images with alt tags, where they can still go through and explore the environment in a different context in case they don't have bandwidth. But as far as our initiative, this has helped us kind of open up to things where we're looking at the kind of cost benefit, where instead of an all-day video shoot of going down somewhere and the logistics of all that, can we streamline our development process by utilizing 3D generated environments, and then maybe build our skill sets to maybe adapt those even more and take steps towards a true virtual reality kind of environment and make steps towards that end of the spectrum. Am I still at time, or where are we at with time?
You have about a minute if you want to take it.
Great. Yeah, no, this is excellent. So a lot of our initiative has been informed by collecting of student perception data. We do give them questionnaires to see what their preferences are. We're seeing a lot of value in the browser-based spectrum of things, with some headsets being used, but not all. But we've gotten a lot of feedback when we've offered headsets and provided headsets as far as pilots, as far as not feeling ill or just not letting it work, and connection issues, and the whole BYOD sort of element to the Google Cardboards wasn't really aligning with us. We're not in the business of renting out headsets and doing that sort of thing. The last thing we always say is like, oh, we're afraid that this could be the next Google Glasses sort of fad. So being grounded in the browser, we've seen a lot of success and a lot of interest, especially in an all online course environment where students are used to discussion forums, regular video. This is kind of something new. It's a little bit flashy. The engagement level's up, and they're enjoying these experiences. So we're constantly looking to iterate. This is, of course, a beta. I think we can probably do a lot better from what we have in this environment, and build upon it. We were kind of faced with building the plane while it's in the air, sort of metaphor, given the times and the crunch, but proud of our team for being able to adapt, be creative, and kind of finding an opportunity to, in another realm, to maybe do more of these and do more of them at scale across all our whole portfolio of courses with all the different programs we have at World Campus.
Great, thank you very much. And I saw a few questions come by about the development platform that we'll come back to in the Q&A session as well. So next up is Bethany Winslow from San Jose State, who will be talking about experiential preparation and XR leadership.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's check the screen here and share my presentation. All righty. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I do have some insights that I've gained directly from participating in some of the mature communities of practice that you can find in World. And, oh, start my video. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, you guys. Hi. So I have some experiences that I've gained from working with you know, different educators from around the world in mature communities of practice since I've been in Second Life since 2014 and other virtual environments. And I know from firsthand experience that the value of building relationships with people, most of whom I will never meet in real life, and I never have Zoom meetings with, just saying. Let's see here. Go to the next. So I think Zoom is great, you know, but let's get real. This is not innovative except to anybody who scrambled to learn how to use it, and only because they were forced to. I think virtual worlds are more important than ever. And according to a survey that we just conducted at San Jose State University for students, just a couple days ago, they released this about the shift to online. Students are looking for ways to connect with their peers. And this was the biggest area where they felt most let down by us. And I think it's probably the same in a lot of institutions. We talk about preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet, but it's the same for faculty. You know, we need to prepare them to teach using technologies and environments that maybe don't exist yet. My colleagues and I are all tinkerers and explorers and adventurers. And honestly, this is about the mindset that really is that is key. The faculty mindset, from where I sit, is very narrow and extremely deep, but that's actually fundamentally at odds with the broad, shallow, jack of all trades kind of approach that's really, quite frankly, more useful when we talk about educational technologies that are coming at us at the speed of light and are changing at a dizzying pace. Okay. So I work with colleagues, and I think of us as tinkerers and explorers and adventurers, and we collaborate because we know how much time it takes to get a variety of experiences that we need than if you just go into something someplace once or twice with a friend and then choose a vendor's solution. And I'm saying this because faculty specifically want nice, neat answers. They ask, what's the best platform? And I'm here to tell you that not only can I not answer that question, I think that it means you're an easy mark for vendors that are really eager to sell a solution to problems that you don't understand well because you haven't got the relevant background, and that's kind of a problem, right? Anyone who's going to provide leadership in this field needs to be in multiple virtual worlds right now. If all we do is spend time on one platform, our skills ossify and we can't adapt. And that honestly is deadly. So what we're doing is trying to compare environments. We want to be able to provide leadership in the field, and if it's your first time being in the field, you're going to be sort of drinking the Kool-Aid thinking that it's the best thing since sliced bread. And I see that a lot with the shiny new XR environments that people, it's their first time in a virtual environment and they get very excited and think it's the best ever and it's going to work for them. But I think it's really important that we really leverage, other people's expertise and their outlook because it takes a lot more time than you think, at least from my experience. And I've been in virtual world since 2014, a lot of different ones. The Community Virtual Library and San Jose State's Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration are actively comparing a bunch of different VR platforms in the last year particularly. And my big takeaway from Vicara's survey about what educators say they need from VR technology for education, everything that everyone wants actually already exists with one single exception, and that's the ability to interact in both a head-mounted display and on desktop. So I think that's kind of interesting that the more you look, the more you're going to find these spaces are actually fairly similar to what we've had and quite honestly are really, really underutilized. I don't know if I Learned for Education, the Immersive Learning Research Network Conference, or the Educators in VR Conference, I don't know if they collected or have reported the statistics, but I would like to know how much time people spent when they attended those conferences in which modality, because my colleagues and I, who all have desktop and also have VR head-mounted displays, we spent most of the time in both conferences primarily on our desktops. Why? Because you can be fully immersed and be really productive at the same time. And with a head-mounted display, that's not really possible. So people want to be able to be together, right? And honestly, we've been able to do this for a really long time. During shelter in place, the new registrations for Second Life went up like 60%, and kids went back into Minecraft to build virtual spaces. And my sister has been long in touch with her college friends still using World of Warcraft because it's pretty and it's a nice way to hang out, right? But no matter how useful these spaces are, they're not more widely used, and they're not going to be because they're just not considered essential. And I'm really concerned about the shiny new toy of VR. It's got everybody on the upslope of what is a brand new hype cycle, when the truth is that desktop virtual environments already are highly engaging, immersive virtual reality. And anyone who thinks that these other technologies are going to be so much easier, that desktop VR is so hard to learn, I think that's naive at best. And it's ironic because we focus about how critical it is for our students to embrace a growth mindset, but we need to hold ourselves, educators, educational technologists, to tasks that we have to be comfortable confronting ambiguity and discomfort, because quite frankly, it's an essential digital literacy. So I want to end this on a note that we would love to have you in Second Life. I encourage you to consider joining us at an XR research symposium in October, because it's critical to be in multiple environments. We're hanging out in these spaces all the time, been there forever, and you can learn a lot. You can't just come to one conference, once. You got to hang out with people in world regularly. And that's my pitch. How did I do on time?
A bit over, but we can stretch for the extra plug because it's really great to continue to grow the community. So the more that we can get back together, the better.
Thanks, everyone.
So next up is Hunter Janes from Ubisoft talking about building a VR rapid development toolkit.
All right. My name is Hunter Janes. I've been at Ubisoft for the better part of a decade doing game and television production. For the past 5 years, I've been in virtual reality production. I'm on my 4th ship title. And what I wanted to do here today is get some tools in front of everyone in this conference that can help you go from nothing to something quicker. And these are off-the-shelf tools, stuff you don't have to build on your own. So why rapid prototype? The simple answer is humans are complicated and they do unexpected things, and because of that, your design is probably bad. And it's not bad because it's not well thought out or well intentioned. It's bad because, again, humans are complicated, they do unexpected things, and wasting time on bad design puts your project at risk. Because fundamentally, the more time you're spending on things that won't ever work, the less time you have to spend on things that are worth doing. So how do you rapid prototype? I'm here today to teach you about a 2-week method called the gray box sprint. It takes you from a rough to a testable design in that time. It has 5 steps, which I'm going to show you today, and you can do it all for 85 bucks with off-the-shelf technology using Unity. Why Unity? It's what I use. You can use any game engine, but all the examples today here will be in Unity. So step 1, you're going to want to add your character, camera, controls. This is all your movement, interaction in VR. You're going to want to avoid doing any custom work. Again, this is all about doing this quickly. The toolkit you want to use is called Virtual Reality Toolkit, or the VRTK. It is 100% free. It's open source. It has just about every VR interaction and movement scheme that you might ever need. Once you're able to move and interact in VR, you're going to want to focus on the usable space, avoid anything pretty. Over on the right, you can see the tools I'm going to recommend, Pro Builder and Pro Grids. Again, 100% free, comes with Unity, and yes, it's just as easy as that GIF right there mixed out to be. You can build worlds in minutes. Next, you're going to want to create simple game logic. This is adding your game system. You're trying to avoid complex designs here, just something very, very simple, and that's because most of your time is going to be spent debugging. Over here on the right, you can see the tool I'm promoting for you to use. It's called Playmaker. It's $65, one-time license. You have it for the rest of your life. The best part, you don't have to be a programmer. As you can see over there, it's completely visual programming. So if you can read a flowchart, you can make a video game. Cannot recommend it enough. I've used that both in games and television production. And finally, you have a place that you can play in. You have a VR avatar dropped in there, and you're able to actually have a game. You're going to want to reinforce your player behavior. This is where sound effects come in. All you're trying to do is communicate positive and negative feedback. Avoid anything that's ambiance, anything that is we consider juice, which is the sort of things that sound good. You can use any toolkit, any sound bank. I recommend Universal Sound FX, available in the Unity store, 20 bucks, 5,000 sound effects for you to use. They're just plug and play, can't say enough nice things about it. Also, if you can't communicate your intentions to the player either through user or either through visuals or your sounds, you're going to want to build a user interface. What I'd recommend here is Text Mesh Pro. Yet again, super free. You can see over on the right a very simple way to get user interface into your gray box. So at this point, you should be able to very quickly get a VR avatar in there, a space to play in, some game logic, and some feedback. It's time to test. You've done this in 2 weeks, hopefully. This is all about observational task-based playtesting. All you need here is a pen and paper. It's going to cost you your self-esteem because it's probably, this is what I have found, your designs are probably bad, and yet again, they're only bad because players do unexpected things. The benefit of the rapid prototyping approach using these off-the-shelf tools is that you found out your design is a problematic design in 2 weeks instead of 6 months. It will save you lots of time, lots of effort. Here is what a sprint looks like. You can see the first 2 days you're using to put your 3 Cs in, character, camera, controls, your VR avatar. You're gonna have 3 days to build a space, 3 days to add a game system, most of that hopefully debugging, and 2 days to reinforce your play. Yet again, this is what's been my sort of sprint model for the past 10 years almost. Your mileage may vary. And here are the tools that I recommend you use. So if you don't ever have to watch this talk again, just look at this slide. Unity, Pro Builder, Pro Grids, VRTK, Playmaker, Text Mesh Pro, Universal Sound Effects Package. All of these tools will empower you to be able to build your own VR experiences. I've heard a lot today about VR being very hard to get up and running. Hopefully this toolkit, yet again, don't own any of this, it's just my recommendation, will help jumpstart your campus VR initiatives. And if you have any question on that ever, just feel free to reach out to me. I think that's 5 minutes.
That is 2 seconds short of 5 minutes, so that was very well timed. So next up will be Jonathan Chipman from Dartmouth, and he'll be talking about 3D modeling and XR for student exploration of landscapes. We switch over to some remote instruction in the spring term that he will describe. Jonathan.
Thanks very much for the introduction, John. Yes, I'm in the geography department here at Dartmouth College, and I teach a number of classes, including a geovisualization class, a geographic data visualization. I taught it in the pre-COVID era. I'll be teaching it again this coming winter term, and so I'm thinking now about how to do that. Here's a picture from the last time I taught this class when the students were able to actually share these headsets and be present in the lab together and walk around, and one student would take off the headset and pass it to the next and things, which won't be happening this coming winter. So this class, it's a mix of lectures, labs, and projects, and there's a real focus on kind of the students learning about how to visualize landscapes and how to kind of do cartographic design for maps, and then moving into 3D modeling and animation and interactive web-based maps, etc. Last time I taught this class, though, I started getting into VR for the students, and we had a unit on 3D modeling and visualization where the students, well, they do a number of different things, but kind of the workflow here is that the students choose a couple of sites they're going to work on. Mostly these are like national parks, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, places like that. And the students basically acquire high-resolution aerial or satellite imagery and digital elevation data for the landscape. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Sorry, just a second. All right, are we seeing this here?
Yes, we've got you now.
Great. Okay, so the students would basically download satellite imagery for these sites and or aerial imagery, put together this digital 3D model in ArcGIS, spatial analysis software, do some simple editing of it in MeshLab, upload it to Sketchfab in order to kind of post it on the web so they can look at it that way, but then climaxing with bringing it into Unity using that template that we developed that lets the students bring in their 3D landscape models. They've also had to, along the way, they've had to pay close attention to the coordinate systems for these models, so that in Unity, another thing they can do is they can put in objects onto the model and have them, they have to be very careful about getting the coordinates right so they can position things here. So for example, here in the Grand Canyon, this is the Bright Angel Trail going down from the south rim down to the inner canyon. The students might position like a Mars rover or some elephants or something in here. They have to understand the coordinate system that they're working with in order to get the elephants positioned correctly so they're not like floating in space or underground or something like that. Then at the end, again, last time I taught this, the students would be working on this on the computers in the lab, and then when they're ready to test it, they'd go up to the front and put on one of the headsets, and we had 6 or 7 of these, so the students would have to take turns with the HTC Vive Pro headsets or Windows Mixed Reality headsets. But this was a great experience. The students would be laughing at each other and helping each other, and it was kind of this learning process for them. Most of them had no prior experience with VR, no prior experience with Unity. Many of them had no prior experience with coding. So they're learning simultaneously about how to work with the satellite imagery, the digital elevation data, how to build 3D models, how to get them into a Unity environment, and how to use the VR itself. So they're learning a lot of things in one relatively short unit here. I'm trying to figure out now how to teach this in this coming winter, where some of the students will be here on campus at Dartmouth, some of them will be remote at home, but even the students on campus will mostly be again, accessing the class remotely as well. So I can't assume that all the students will have great internet connections, except for the ones on campus. I can't assume that they will have access to VR headsets. They certainly won't be using sharing the ones in the lab. So I'm curious to talk to people about their experience with different options for this. We could certainly do things using flat screens like Sketchfab, etc., and have them design stuff in Unity, but it would be nice to go beyond that as well. Just before I end here, I want to say a little bit going beyond this kind of visualization experience. For other classes, and for other work, independent study projects with students, we're very interested in kind of the use of VR technologies for doing research, field work in the geosciences. So this is a project. I've actually got a student, transfer student from Vassar College working for me this summer in Greenland. And of course, Americans can't go to Greenland right now. They won't let us in. So this is an area in West Greenland, and Julia is essentially doing virtual lichenometry. She's using these digital 3D models of our research sites to go in and measure lichens, hunt for lichens growing on the rocks here, particular rhizocarpin lichens, and measure the diameters of the lichens and measure their distances to the scarp here where the erosion is occurring. So she's actually using this digital virtual environment to do virtual field work on real world sites in Greenland without ever setting foot on the landscape there. So I kind of see like what I'm working on right now is a continuum of data visualization for landscapes moving into actual data analysis, measurement, and field work, virtual field work. So I'm really excited about this, but have a lot of questions as well about how to proceed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jonathan. So next up, I believe, will be XD Yang, who will be talking about Circuit Lab, which is another system made here at Dartmouth for aiding remote electronics labs.
All right, can you see my screen? Hello?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm XD, and I'm an assistant professor of computer science at Dartmouth. And my research is in human-computer interaction. And in particular, I investigate, future interactive systems and bring interactivity to everyday objects. So a lot of my research projects are related to electronics and prototyping, interactive physical artifacts. And these are all fun stuff. So in fact, this is something many CS students are interested in doing these days. In CS education, there is a fast-growing area which is called physical computing, and we teach students computational thinking through the development of interactive physical systems using both hardware, such as sensors, electronics, actuators, and software, to sense and respond to the real world. So studies have found that many students of different backgrounds are better engaged in class with physical computing than with those traditional teaching methods and the tools. So what a class of physical computing would look like, something like this, shown in a picture. Everybody sit around in a lab or a studio environment, and instructor gives lectures. And a critical component of students' learning activity often involves in-class exercises or labs, and which allows students to practice the skills and better understand the concepts taught in class. So this is all good, but many existing labs or teaching materials are designed to be delivered in person, and we don't know how or what challenges students and instructors will be facing in a remote teaching environment that we all experience these days. So what we did was we conducted a formative study with 9 students, and each student created a breadboard circuit in their homes, and an instructor was made available to the students to answer their questions and provide advice. So this is really a sort of like preliminary study, as you can tell, right? Because in a real classroom, we also have more than 9 students. So here are some results. And first, there was a significant long wait time for students to receive help. The instructor also told us that it took him longer to help students remotely. Some of the reason is that it was significantly more challenging for the instructor to view and understand the students' circuits through a camera. It's not very convenient at all, especially when wires are massive. So they have to communicate verbally a lot of time, and it takes time. And the third, in a virtual lab setting, the instructor could not walk around the classroom and check out the students' progress. And the instructor said the students could have been more engaged in learning if he could proactively give them suggestions or advices on the fly. So that's also something that is missing. So of course, these are problems that cannot be easily solved. But what I want to show next is something that we've created as a first step to mitigate some of those issues. So I'm going to show a system which is called a Circuit Lab. It is a sort of like a cheap augmented reality system using students' smartphones. And the system acts like a sort of like a virtual instructor or TA of some kind to provide students with context-sensitive learning assistance. Here, I'm going to play a video for you. Let me see. In a second. I don't think you can hear the sound. Let me share my screen again. Sorry. There we go. Okay.
In this video, we present Circuit Lab, a system that provides students with context-sensitive learning assistance in remote learning labs for electronics, while also allowing an instructor to better manage the help students need. Motivated by a formative study, where we uncovered remote learning issues, such as repeated questions, we created Circuit Lab. It consists of a number of different parts. First, a custom 3D printed holder holds a smartphone that is placed above the breadboard with markers. A custom smartphone app with information such as circuit style is displayed, and information is also overlaid above the breadboard using the smartphone camera. As the user is constructing a circuit, information is displayed ambiently to guide the user. A desktop app for the user also displays sample code and other information to test the circuit that they are currently creating. As the user is constructing a circuit, information is displayed as a notification or ambiently to guide the user. Circuit Lab also provides an interface for the instructor to configure and manage feedback. For example, the instructor can customize the feedback students will receive and whether information should be displayed ambiently or as a notification. They are also able to remotely monitor several students and their breadboard circuits all at once, helping them better manage how they provide feedback. In our feedback interviews, students found our system useful in getting answers to common questions, and they also found they could spend more time learning and practicing the circuit at their own pace.
All right, so that's all that I want to show today. But before I end my talk, I want to quickly tell some of the lessons that we've learned. So first, we found that debugging is still quite hard through a camera. So the next, machine intelligence is currently used for understanding students' progress in our system. We think more, fruitful research can be carried out in applying AI and machine learning to better facilitate Q&As, like error detection, error reduction, this kind of stuff. And on the other hand, it's also important to understand what aspects of a remote electronics lab can be better supported by a human or a machine to understand how these two entities can work together to provide students with a better learning experience. So I think this line of research will lead to a much more effective hybrid sort of like a system to incorporate both machine and human intelligence to solve those pressing problems the students and others are facing in STEM education. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Excellent, XD. Thank you very much. To keep things moving along, next up will be Chris Shelton from Penn State talking about Fort LeBoeuf in VR.
Hello. I'm gonna, if it's all right, I'm gonna ask my other presenter to jump on. Jasper, there. So Jasper and I, this is a project that Jasper and I have been working on together. And the idea is really to recreate, let me start up the screen here, my apologies. There you go, you should all be able to see that. Is to recreate what used to be a historical fort in VR. Jasper, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, yes. So like Chris said, the purpose of this project is to recreate the historical Fort LeBoeuf in virtual and augmented reality. And in doing so, examine opportunities for digital preservation and education. In doing so, we hope to be able to offer immersive, interactive experiences for students to engage with these digital humanities topics in ways that they wouldn't necessarily be able to otherwise. And in doing so, also explore chances for increasing access, even virtual access, to some of these particular sites and topics. Certainly the COVID-19 pandemic has only heightened the importance of access issues and access equity. In doing so, we've also brought in student workers to help prepare them with some of these vital virtual skills that are only going to become more important as we move forward and virtual reality continues to expand as a field. Just to give you a little bit of historical background on Fort LeBoeuf, for those of you who aren't familiar with the southern coast of Lake Erie, it was a fort established by French colonial forces in 1753 at the end of a portage road between Lake Erie and Rivière-au-Boeuf, or LeBoeuf Creek as it is known. LeBoeuf Creek ultimately feeds into the Ohio River Basin, which in turn feeds into the Mississippi River. So as such, Fort LeBoeuf is a key part of the colonial French North American trade network. It would allow folks coming from the Great Lakes to get out, walk down the land, and then at Fort LeBoeuf, rejoin the river system, which could carry them all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. In 1753, famously, a British major, George Washington, visits Fort LeBoeuf to ask the French colonial forces to remove themselves from the area to allow for further British expansion into the area. Their refusal at Fort LeBoeuf is one of the precipitating causes of the French and Indian War, which then lasts from 1754 to 1763. Now, unfortunately, in the course of the French and Indian War, Fort LeBoeuf is destroyed, meaning there is no surviving structure whatsoever of this important site. There are a few remaining artifacts, but that's about it, which provide an interesting challenge, but also opportunity for our digital recreation efforts, meaning we have to combine the few remaining written sources that describe Fort LeBoeuf, such as George Washington's journal, the French Governor Duquesne's letters, and some other reports from various members of the French and Indian War, with knowledge that we have of other French colonial architectures, such as the now destroyed Fort Machault, Fort Duquesne, and the existing Fort Niagara on Lake Ontario, so it provided this really interesting dynamic challenge that required us to utilize some really disparate fields of knowledge, combine them to create this Fort LeBoeuf model. I'll talk to you a bit more about the actual model itself. We'll go back to Chris Shelton.
So as Jasper was mentioning, what we have currently available, and it's the issue with it is really illustrated quite well due to our the situation we're encountering due to COVID-19. Most of the things we have available are texts, and they're texts that are only available on site. We also have some sketches. These things aren't readily available, and we have dioramas that are on site. So it's really limiting when we can't get students to the site to actually view these things. And so what we're working on over the summer, my research assistant is working to create this model in CAD utilizing the different references we have. So the historical text of George Washington, the different sketches we have in consultation with the Historical Society itself. So here's the model as it's currently being worked in AutoCAD. The idea then would be to bring it from AutoCAD and bring it to life really utilizing something like Twinmotion, which is what we've done here. As you can see, it's still a rough prototype. There's still a lot that needs to be added, but it is starting to take shape and take form. I'll show you a real brief video here, just a quick fly through within Twinmotion. So you can see some of the main structures are there. They're all built based on the models that we have. So or based on the knowledge that we have in terms of size dimensions. So once you use them in VR and AR, it will all be spatially and hopefully visually accurate. The idea going forward though is to continue fine-tuning this model for XR applications. At first will be VR and then moved into geo-locked AR using things like Visual Live 3D or Acular. We also, owing to COVID, we've had to put our second bullet point on hold there, the high fidelity scans using things like the Faro LiDAR or ferro-lidar scanners, so the Focus S70 and the Quantum Arm we have available, but getting them to the historical site to get scans of these artifacts and put into the model then has been a bit of a challenge. But the idea would be we are collaborating on this with Fort LaBeouf and Fairview school districts to integrate this into not just the student curriculum, but as we further expand into other models, get those students from K to 12 working on it with us. So integrating them into this XR development. And that's what we have.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So next up is Paula McDowell from University of Saskatchewan, talking about educational VR in remote teaching.
Good morning. Okay, there we are. Welcome to everybody that's joining us in this session here today. I am very honored and privileged to be sitting here and listening to all the leading edge work and research and teaching being done by the other presenters. It's my mind is full, and thanks you to everyone for sharing. I'm going to share my screen. So I am an assistant professor at the University of Saskatchewan. I work in the College of Education, which means that I get the opportunity to work with teachers, teacher candidates, and grad students in our educational technology and design program. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me pretty much everywhere on the internet and all the major social media channels or Discord. Just look for Paula McDowell. And what I thought I would share with you today in this 5 minutes is a new course that I had the opportunity to design and teach this summer. I've been working in AR, VR, XR for education for the past 3 years now, integrating the different realities into my courses. But this summer actually had opportunity to teach a course in VR. So we all had the Oculus Quest headset. We met in different environments in Engage, Altspace, for Bella, and explored the pros and cons of these different platforms. Very transformative kind of learning opportunity for me this summer. And the focus of the course is on designing immersive experiences for K-12 learning environments. So what this means, and again, my students in my course are either teachers or grad students or else teachers in training. And my goal for this course is that they would learn more about immersive education and how to design experiences that they can then take into their classrooms to do with their students and also to introduce to their colleagues. So to give you an idea of some of the assignments that the students created, Canada's Food Guide in VR. Another student built Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in a virtual world. So just imagine kind of a modernized Shakespeare unit that actually, where students could perform their scenes and learn about Shakespeare in an actual virtual world with the Globe Theatre. An escape room in VR based on the Shawshank Redemption novel. Another world is a green punk VR world to explore the science of green energy. Grasslands National Park was built in VR. The Boreal Forest biome was built in VR. And 2 other students built a scavenger hunt in this forest with videos from Indigenous knowledge keepers. We also did some AR projects like Math AR and AR hiking trail. And of all the things to share, there are many, many things to share. I think I could talk about this for hours, but I thought I would talk about the reasons for me why why I chose to teach this in VR. I don't have to. I chose to do it this way, and I've been doing things in XR for the past 3 years. So what are some of the reasons why? You might have different answers, but these are reasons for me. So this sense of collaborative co-presence. Teaching in VR facilitates human connection. That's unequivocally no question about that for me. Even though we're meeting at a distance, it really does feel like we're close and connected. That leads into what I call collective cognitive responsibility, which means that we are all responsible for each other's learning. So I am not the only expert in the class. There's responsibility that everybody can help each other out on ideas, on tech issues. And this actually extends beyond my course. I will say that this summer, the Educators in VR community, huge shout out, because a lot of my students got support from other people that were in the Educators in VR community. So beyond my course, and it's really helped them to build better worlds. Something I call living curriculum is, you might think of that as experiential learning, but as an educator, it is not enough to just experience things. We want to also reflect on our experiences. And a lot of opportunities for experiencing things in VR. Transversal skills is also important if you're in education. That might be a new term for some of you. You can think of it as what we used to call 21st century skills, which now is a bit out of date. So we've come up with a new term. And this is really a strong emphasis on skills that we need for future work and life, and also to achieve a transition to a more sustainable world. So these are skills that have to be learned, but they're hard to teach. Things like respect for the environment, cultural understanding, valuing diversity, and there is a lot of meaningful potential for VR. World building, students can build their own environments and experiences to demonstrate their knowledge. Also known as best homework ever. Not to put too much hype on it, but in higher education, it is nice to have another option beyond writing papers and writing exams for assignments. And I will add, like many of the speakers before, this is not about a specific tool or technique, but we really do need to explore all the many good options, because the diverse options really are needed to deal with diversity, equity, access to internet, etc. Right in the middle, I see my time is kind of up. Most important learning objectives, and they should be SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And relationship building is key. That's a lot of joyful learning happens, and I'm learning every day. I'm super happy. I'm able to inspire my students, and there's a lot of synergy that happens. So that's what I'd like to share today.
Thank you very much, Paula. So last presentation is going to bridge us into the noon session as well. This is going to be Matt Cook from the Harvard Library talking about Mozilla Hubs.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thanks to the conference organizers as well. I've been tempted to revise my entire talk several times as a result of what I've heard so far today, but instead of doing that, I'm going to actually focus on a caveat to start. And can people see my screen or my slides?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So the caveat here is preliminary experiments and thoughts. There will be others among us, including you, John, that will know a lot more about hubs and the technical infrastructure than I will. These are just a couple months of experience and use cases and strengths and weaknesses. So I'm excited to share and to add to this and to refine it based on what I've heard today. What Hubs brings and what I'm excited about is that it falls in a category of applications that you might consider productivity grade, which is relatively new for virtual reality. And there are several prominent examples that we've worked with successfully in the past. You can see some named there at the bottom. The idea here is resource allocation. So I don't manage large teams. I generally avoid, if I can, developing new software. You know, no one has a ton of money to purchase a lot of software. So the idea is, how can you streamline your software library to cover the widest disciplinary ground and help the most people, ideally with their own data. So we're looking at sandboxes in this case rather than narrative experiences. And that's kind of what Hubs fulfills in terms of criteria. You can import your own data on the fly in real time over a network of headsets. And that's a really big deal, especially if multiple people in headsets all around the world can be in that environment together, which we'll see. Hubs also has added benefits that are specific to remote teaching and learning. Number one, it's web-based, which means to me, it's important because you don't have to install any extra software. Once your browser's running and certain, say, microphone is enabled, then you can immediately jump into a session without worrying about installing anything. That's a big deal. We also have multi-platform support for Hubs. So I have a Quest behind me and I like to use it in Hubs, but as people mentioned, sometimes it's easier to be on desktop and be doing multiple things at once and be in a Hub session, which you can do easily. You also have mobile support, which I imagine in the fall, as this gets rolled out to students, will become more and more important. Finally, the URLs, like the ones we're going to join today, they're persistent. That means you don't have to be in there to moderate, say, as an instructor every time your students want to get together in Hubs to hang out. So you can have these sort of casual, serendipitous interactions with your classmates, which were typical of campus life, but will not be typical in the fall. I think it's worth emphasizing that benefit. Of course, it's not all gravy in Hubs. There are definite limitations and there are overlapping limitations. Number one, I've seen and heard from a lot of users that the avatar situation is sort of basic, kind of cartoony. You don't have a lot of like gesture support, body language is not well supported. If you're in VR, you get a little bit of that because you have hand tracking, of course, with the controllers. So you do have tracked hands that you can view over the network if you have a headset. But for everyone else, you kind of get this like voice representation with the bobbing of your head or with some basic mouth movement. I think that's a Venus flytrap that will actually open its mouth as you talk in a session. And because the focus is not each other in terms of avatar fidelity, the focus can and should be the object of study. So whether that's the context, the environment that you're interacting within, the background essentially, or the target course content. So the object that you're studying, a 3D model, say, that you import into the session on the fly. The problem is if you preload a scene, and we run into this with a whole bunch of super detailed models, then everyone's going to take a lot of time loading the scene, and that, or they'll get kicked out of the scene, or you can't have a lot of people in there together, or it won't work well on mobile. So you got to be really careful about how you design your scene and what you pick to import. If you want to preload objects, you got to be really careful about decimating them in advance, like we're trying to do now with Matterport scan downloads. And then finally, this has been mentioned as well, flat content interactions, so document interactions, PowerPoint slide interactions, image and videos. These are essentially single angle or single perspective content. So you kind of have to know where they are in a scene to locate them and engage with them, which is not super obvious, which kind of leads me to my orientation and sort of the primary focus of today's talk. So there's a document which you'll see linked in the program. That's our running orientation, Hubs orientation notes. Please, add comments if you like. The big thing we've found and that I've noticed about entering a Hub scene for the first time is that it's not easy for non-gamers to move around. I'm used to using two hands at the same time when I move through software. I put my right hand on my mouse, I put my left hand on WSAD generally, and that spreads your hands apart. You can do arrow keys as well with your left hand, but if you're right-handed like I am and your mouse is just to the right side of your keyboard, then your hands are super close together. You got to walk people through that. You got to give people a little bit of background on how to move through a 3D environment. That's sort of first and foremost. The next thing is, once they learn that, to show them how to break out into rooms. This is a big deal. A lot of people want to do breakout rooms in virtual environments. You have to be able to move first, and then spatial audio kicks in and volume will decrease as you move further away from your other avatars. Finally, how do you import and export content? That's a big deal and key functionality that needs to be trained. Here's some use cases currently going on at Harvard. Check out the MetaLab if you haven't. That was a very early use case. We're looking at, okay, what are Zoom alternatives that would allow us, instead of looking at each other for hours at a time in a Zoom window, a bunch of floating heads, we want to look out at the world or out at content. So this is the motivation here. You can see an image on the right is material from our special collection, specifically Houghton Library, where we have chip pottery. There's a 3D model floating there you can kind of see, but there's also 2D flat content. So this is a mixed media implementation. And then finally, building out culture-specific environments for Romance languages. So a French background, a Spanish background, and an Italian background. These are sort of incoming demand that we're seeing here at Harvard Library. And this is the way we're going with it. You can't, or I wouldn't recommend hosting private student data on a public Mozilla Hub server. So I believe John has circumvented this with some of the environments we're about to visit. You can deploy custom and secure servers on AWS or DigitalOcean. There's documentation for that. I'm also interested in perhaps sending out hardware kits. So basically doing an at-home project, even if it's only for colleagues in the library, to build out a joystick, and that will be your dedicated movement scheme for Mozilla Hub session. So it's twofold benefit. It'll allow you to move easier through a scene with a single controller, but it'll also give you that sort of context switch to move into a new world. Okay, now we're going into Hub's world. I'm going to pull out my joystick that I built from home as part of a project. And then finally, we're going to do an avatar hackathon. The idea here is to maximize the use of sort of waveform visualization. So instead of these cartoony avatars, okay, let's take sound, which is quite broad bandwidth, the human voice, and let's try to maximize the visualization of that in place of these sort of cartoonish avatars. So you can imagine like floating balls of light that are sort of fluctuating with emotion and inflection and intensity. So these are ways that we're hoping to take the platform moving forward. But yeah, thank you. And I look forward to seeing everyone at Hubs.
Thank you very much. You just did quite a bit of my job for me, and I appreciate that a lot. So we do have a little bit of time for questions, and several of them were more specific to like specific tool chains and development tools for the different presenters. It looked like a few of those got caught during chat, but what we'll do for those is just check in with the presenters after the fact and see if they can give us a list of some of the tools that were being used within their projects. One question, since we have relatively little time, that I want to get to, though, is applicable to everybody, but because Hunter mentioned it, I'm going to throw it at him. How would you characterize, your design is bad realizations? That is something that I think everybody has to deal with, and any thoughts on how to quickly realize that and move on, I think would be valuable.
That's a really big question. I think I'm going to sort of talk about it two ways. The first way is realizing the difference between bad VR design and bad game design, and then we'll flip back over to bad experience / game design. The big difference with VR is that humans primarily, once they stop thinking that they're playing a game and start thinking that they're in actual space, bring all of the real world problems that you have with your students in your classroom into the VR space. So you can't be sure they're looking at the thing you want them to look at. They get easily distracted. They might be confused by an interaction that would not be confusing in a flat screen game, but is confusing in a VR game because they want it to work like real life. So in general, most of the realizations that we find are humans acting like humans in a real space. But because we're game designers, we designed it to be more like a video game than real life. But sort of more broadly, how do you know bad design from good design? In general, the quickest path to good design is to simplify your idea down to something that is easily understood the moment someone encounters it. So if you're a designer for a while, you start to notice these things even on the paper prototype stage, but it's still, almost impossible to understand all of the bad design before you go into testing, which to me is why rapid prototyping is so important, because I've been doing this the better part of a decade now, and I'm still continually surprised by things that I thought were obvious or intuitive and just simply are not. And then the other side of it is beyond just pure usability, you have to worry about engagement. And so engagement is kind of goes two ways in VR. One is limiting VR fatigue. So making sure that you're not asking your users to do complicated or grueling activities very often because they'll tire out just like in real life. The other side is a engaging activity, which is something they enjoy doing innately. That's the other side of good design. So beyond just can they go from point A to point B, are they comfortable doing it, and do they want to do it again? Are sort of the hallmarks of good design, and you only know that once you go into testing. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question, or is that a little bit too roundabout?
I mean, given that I asked a question that would probably take about 40 years to answer, I think that you did a pretty good job in that amount of time. Thank you very much. So, as mentioned, what we're going to do at this point is our own little experiment in, we'll call it XR, but a lot of you will be able to get in through your flat browser windows here. We're going to switch over to Mozilla Hubs for the next 2 hours, largely so that you can wander around, chat with people, basically socialize outside of this massive crowd of Zoom folks. A couple of things to note during that time. There are demos within all of the spaces, and those are links to external sites. So there's not going to be any in-hubs demos or anything like that. But if you want more information about any of the presentations that you've seen so far, you will be able to click through there and take a look. Also, at 1 o'clock, there will be a guided discussion looking at questions of experiential learning and pedagogy specifically for XR. If you can join us in a room that will appear in the program in the near future, it's not there yet, but it will be there probably about 12:30. That's just going to be sort of a roundtable talk. It's not hugely formal, but there will be a little bit more structure to it, and we will be talking about that specific subject. So as far as Hubs itself goes, one thing to be aware of is that Hubs does have a limitation on the number of concurrent users in a room. That limitation is tied to the number of actual avatars that are in the room, not necessarily the people who are connected to it, although there is another cap for that as well. So what you'll find when you go into some of these Hubs rooms is that you might be allowed in with an avatar, or you might be dropped at essentially a waiting room. The way that we've gotten around this is to just create lots of small rooms. So if you go take a look at the program site that you should have gotten a link to in your email, you'll now see that there are 10 Mozilla Hubs rooms linked, all with fun animal names so that you can tell your friends, hey, go meet me in the zebra room or whatever that may be. Once you get in there, just feel free to walk around and chat. The claim process for accounts does take a couple of steps, and in order to talk through that and what you'll experience once you get in there, Kalagoel has set up a video for you that I will share briefly. A second, sorry. There we go. So if we watch this, then after that, you can go chat in Hubs. Except audio didn't get shared. One moment, please.
Hi, I'm Kalagoel, they them pronouns. I'm the Newcomb and ITC XR Fellow at Dartmouth's Dev Studio. I want to tell you a bit about how we're going to be using Hubs for the upcoming conference. Go to dartmouthhubs.org in any browser. After that, you want to click on the Sign In button in the top right corner. Type in the same email address you used to sign up for the event and press the green Next button. An email will be sent from noreply@mail.dartmouthhubs.org to verify your email address. There won't be a password required, it's just an email verification. It might be in your junk or spam folder, make sure to check that. But the email will contain a link to click. Once you click that link, your email will be verified on that browser and computer. You'll be logged into Dartmouth Hubs, as you can see here in the top right corner. Once you're logged in, entering a room on a laptop or desktop is probably the simplest, so we'll start from there. So there's links on the program page to different rooms. If you see a white button saying watch from lobby, that means the room is full. You'd still be able to see and hear others, but you wouldn't be able to talk or move around. If a room is full, you're always welcome to go find another room from the program page and join it instead. Once you're in a room, you can also change rooms, so if you have a friend or colleague that's already in a room and you want to be in the same room as them, they can also just go to a different room that has more spots and you can join them there. If instead you see a green button saying enter room, that means there's space in the room and you can click on that button. If this is your first time in Dartmouth Hubs, you'll be prompted to choose an avatar and a name. Please use the name you signed up with or another name that people know you by and you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable doing so, please include your pronouns in your name so that people know better how to address you. Then click on the next green button that says enter on screen. Here you can choose and test out different audio options. You can choose to mute your mic before entering. Once you're done with that, you can click enter now. Thank you so much for coming to this conference. I hope to see you there. If you have any other questions, you can always contact the organizers of this event. Also, we're going to be posting a written up transcript of basically everything I went over in this video. Thank you. Have a good day.
So thank you very much. One thing to note there, there's also a longer version of that video if you do want to use a headset to log into Hubs. That instruction video is back on the program site. And I will put the program site into chat just so that everybody has that. But other than that, I will see you there, and we will leave this Zoom session open over the next couple of hours. We will try, depending on how it works, again, this is all an experiment, to stream the discussion from the 1 o'clock structured discussion around experiential learning into Zoom as well, in case there are some who want to attend but can't fit in under the meeting cap. So check for that here as well. Other than that, this has been a really great morning, and I encourage you to go check out Hubs and chat with some of the others who have joined us. Thank you very much.